Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Sage Accounting topic webinar. My name is Joanne Barnard, and I will be your host for this session. This is the accounting system that we are referring to today. If you do use Pastel Accounting, that webinar will happen on Thursday. Today, what we are going to be talking about is we're going to be talking and demonstrating how to create a new company in Sage Accounting, and then how to use the company settings and what those settings are and how you set up your company. So firstly, I do have a company that is already here. However, I would then go to my company and I would go into my company console. So if you can have multiple companies and you come into your company console, you will see the following console. And from here, you can then add a company, or as accountants, you can also accept the requests that you've received or send a request to one of your clients. So here you can see request accountant access. This is for the accountants version, please note. And then to create a new company, I would just click on add company and next. Now here it's asking me for my company name. You put in your name, you can then type in your postal address, as well as your physical address, etc. So I'm not going to fill in all the details, otherwise we'll be here forever. But you fill in your details. Do you want to add your banking details to invoices and quotations? This is where you can add your banking details. And that will then appear on your invoices and quotations. Then we can click on next. And it will then advise you if you want to add a logo to your invoices. You can then choose a file. It does need to be a JPEG, a PNG, a BMP, which is your paint, a GIF, or a TIFF. So I think most of us know JPEG and BMP. So it can be in paint. So you would go in and, for example, find your logo, and you would click on OK, and it will add your logo accordingly. Then invoices and statement logo positions. This is where you can choose top left or top right. And if you do select it, you will see that it will then show you where it's going to place the information as well as your logo. Then you can choose the layout to use for your invoices and statements. So here you can see there's the classic layout, the modern layout, as well as the plain layout, and you can choose that from the list that shows. And then again, we would just click on next. If you do want to design your own forms, you can do that using the custom layout. However, you will need to be on Windows, and then you download that program and you log in using your login details for your Sage Accounting, and then you can edit your document layouts accordingly. Then on your company settings, it will ask you to allow your customers to view invoices and quotations as well as their accounts history online. So this we refer to as the customer zone, and your customers can log in, and depending on the options you select, they will be able to view that history. So if you select invoices and quotes only, they will only be able to see their invoices and quotes. If you select invoices and accounts history, they will be able to view their full accounts history. And if you don't want to enable this, you just deselect and enable your customer zone. Once you've made your selection, you click next, and then it's going to take you to your financial details. So this is where you can say whether you charge VAT or not, and you can enter your VAT number as it appears on your invoices. And then you can set up your invoice settings. So for example, when adding quantities to your invoice lines, how many decimals do you want to display? This is for the quantities of your items. So these are physical items, and what do you want it to display? If you're working in kilograms, for example, maybe you sell dairy and you sell cheese and we weigh that, or you sell meat and you weigh that. That would be when you can select the 4 decimals so that you can have your kilograms and your grams, or you can select 0. So this is just for your quantities, financial year end. So this is when is the next end of your financial year going to happen. So the most common would be at the end of February, and it would be 2025 because we are in the 2024-2025 financial year. However, you can change this accordingly. Another very common year end is the end of September, where that is the last day of the financial year. So that is also very common. Then protection and personal information. So this is how long you want your retention period of that personal information. And for SARS, it's normally set to 5 years, and you can say this is required by SARS in South Africa, whatever the requirement is. After then, that information needs to be removed. And then you would click on finish. If you do not enter your VAT number, it will tell you this, and it will tell you that there's a 10-digit number allocated by SARS. Clearly, I don't have that because I'm not actually a company. So we're going to hope that this will work. And it did, so thank goodness for that. But basically, it will tell you if there is something that you need to set up that is not set up. Now, when you go into your company for the first time, as part of your subscription, it will advise you about Sage Accounting on mobile, and it will tell you how you can download it on the App Store or the Google Store. You can do that because you can use multiple devices to log into your Sage Accounting. So you can use tablets and phones if you wish to. In this case, I'm just going to go OK. And then it's going to remind you of your cookies, accept the recommended settings, and then it's going to quickly just tell you the different options. So you can read these options accordingly. It can tell you how these options work, but it'll quickly go through them to give you an overview of the 7 main tasks that you can perform. And then once the quick tips are done, you can then just click on done. Now, before you get started, it is advised that you go through your company and your change company settings, just to check those company settings and to make sure that they are set accordingly. So for example, if you didn't enter all of the information, this is where you can come in and you can enter your information accordingly. So you can enter your email, and you can then select whether you wish to use your own personal email for communications, or if you wish it to use the mail service at accounting. So this is our one that'll tell clients this is what it's coming from, or you can use your own. You can also CC everything to yourself. So if that's something that you would like, you can then select that up, or select that option and then go always CC this email address and fill in all of the details accordingly. Then if we go to additional company information, this is where you can put your company tax number, the registered name. So you might be a trading as, so you can put in the registered name, the registered number. So on the company details, you will have your trading name. But then on the additional details is the actual registered name for your company. So it could be like 157 Sunset, trading as Joanne's Trading Services. So you would put that registered name there, the registered number, your tax office, and the entity type. So are you a closed corporation, a company, a partnership, a sole propriety, or a trust? And you can select those accordingly. Then you can put your tax practitioner details as well as your SARS contact information. So this is the person that you would contact if you have any tax issues. And then we can go to the customer zone. Now, if you didn't enable it at first, you can choose to enable it here. And again, you can change those settings accordingly. This is also where you can put the company displayed on your customer zone. So again, if you're a trading as, this is where you can put the name that people would know instead of the 567 Sunset. Then our online payment gateways. This is if you have a payment gateway like Netcash. This is where you could come in, you could go add payment gateway, and you will see that you can select Payment Pebble or Netcash. These are APIs that plug in. You then can select your default gateway. If you are interested in this, you can select I do not have a Neshcat account, or for Pebble, you would then just select your bank account. But for Netcash, if you do want to set that up, if you do select that, it will take you through, because they will need to provide you with a service key. And once they've provided you with that service key, only then will the API connect and will you be able to use that service. You can also then select to send email notifications of those payments. And then if we go to Netcash, this is where you can then select the bank account to use. If you have not set that up yet, you can then come back to this. Is it customer payments? Is it supplier payments? Is it both? You will tick your options, but only if Netcash is set up. You've gotten hold of them, they've given you that service number. Then guys, on our general settings, this is where you can come and look and you can create your financial years. So here we can see that they have set up last year for me as well as this year, but this is where you can select the years if need be. So we can click on plus and it will then add the years accordingly. This is also where you can set your lockdown date. So for example, your year end, you ran it on the 30th of, in my case, the 30th of September 2024. I can then set that lockdown date, which means no one can, even if someone goes into my October to September 2023-24 year, they will not be able to process anything because I've said that all transactions are locked down. So they can go and view reports. There will be no processing in that period. In order to process, you would need to deselect the lockdown date, go in process, come back, and then set your lockdown date accordingly. It is very helpful so that accidents don't occur. Then if we look at our rounding, this is if you wish to have rounding. So you can have no rounding, you can have normal rounding. So normal rounding will round to the nearest 5. 4 to 1 will round down to the whole. 5 to 9 will round up as per normal. Then you can also choose whether you would prefer to round down or round up. And when you select those options, you then select what you want to round up to the nearest 5, to the nearest 10, to the nearest 100, etc. Please note that you are entering the number of cents. So if you say to the nearest 5, it's not the nearest 5 rand, it's the nearest 5 cents. So if you want to go to the nearest rand, it would be 100. So it works in cents, as said. Then if we look at our regional settings, guys, the regional settings on the system here are not the same as your regional settings in your control panel. So if we go to the Windows control panel, if you do plan on using imports, it is strongly advised that you do come into your Windows control panel. From there, you select region, and on the region, you go to additional settings, and then you make sure that your decimal symbol is a full stop, digit grouping is a comma. It should also, be set to English South Africa. And then you would do that for decimal setting and digit grouping symbol, as well on the numbers tab, as well as your currency. This is also where you can set your currency symbol, decimal symbol, full stop, digit grouping, comma. And then the date, this is if you're going to import your bank statements. Strongly advise it's set to day, month, year. If you are based in South Africa, which most of you are, that is the date that we use. In America, they use month, day, year. Here we use day, month, year. So please set it up like that. Otherwise, when you download your statements, or if you are working in a CSV file, an Excel spreadsheet, and it's set to month, day, year, that can cause errors. So please make sure that your regional setting in your control panel, as well as in the system itself, is set correctly. Now the system will run like this, but if you're importing Excel looks at your control panel regional settings, not your actual browser regional settings. That's why please make sure both are set up correctly. Then if we look at our customer and supplier settings, this is where we can warn. Are there duplicate customer references? Are there duplicate supplier invoice numbers? Do we want to display inactive customers and suppliers? If this is a new company, it's unlikely that that option is even going to be viable because we're only going to load what's necessary. But this is where, if you are in a working company and you've had inactive customers and suppliers and they keep coming up in your list, that can be quite annoying. So you can deselect that option and then you'll only see your active customers and suppliers when processing. Likewise, do you want to see those on your reports? There may be a reason that you need them on your reports. For example, a customer has become inactive, but they still owe you money. In that case, you would want to run them in your reports, even if you've made them inactive. However, you shouldn't until they've paid you. But again, do you want to see those, yes or no? Then using inclusive processing on customers and suppliers by default. So by default, the system is exclusive. So it excludes that. If you want it to use inclusive processing, you need to tick this option. Then use account as default document line type selection. So if you do not make use of inventory items, you are not going to use inventory items, there's no physical stock involved, and you are not going to register your services as an item, because you can do that. You can add an item as a service item. This is where you can go, you know what, I'm just going to use my general ledger accounts. And instead of it defaulting to item then on your documents, it will default to account. And it will allow you to select the GL account that you want to process directly to. If you do not select that option, it will select item by default, and you will have to click the drop down and then select what you want to use. Then if we look at our item settings, again, this is if you are actually physically selling goods, or if you are happy to add your items as a service so that you can actually keep track of those services. This is where you can select whether you want to check if that item falls below 0. This would not be for service items. Do not allow items to fall below 0. So again, for physical items, you don't want the system to think you're selling things that you are not selling. Warn when an item cost is 0. So if an item has a cost of 0, you want the system to warn you about that so that you know, is this correct? Should it be 0? Again, for service items, initially the cost should be 0 because it's a service you're providing. You didn't have to spend anything to gain that cost. There are exceptions to that rule, but in general, that cost will be 0. So in that case, you may not want to select it. But for example, if you're purchasing goods from your supplier to sell them onto the customer, you probably don't want that item cost to be 0 because it's going to inflate your gross profit, which means SARS is going to ask you for a lot more money. Then warn when item selling price is below the cost. So again, that's very important. Unless an item is not moving and you have chosen to try to recoup costs as much as possible and you're prepared to sell it below cost, it's a good idea if the system warns you so you can go, yes, this is legit, it's a slow moving item. I'm hoping to at least cover half of the costs I spent on it. Otherwise, you do not want to be selling your stock below the cost price. Then again, display inactive items. When you're processing, you probably don't want to see that, especially if you have a long list of items. Display inactive items on reports. Again, it is up to you, but it's unlikely you would want to see those. Then here, sales orders, reserve item quantities. Now, this is important if you are going to work on sales orders. A lot of people will go into the system when we get to documents and statements, and they will rename those, they will rename that document to perform an invoice. And so in that case, basically your customer has agreed that, look, I've agreed to the quote. This is basically me paying for this order. And you then, for example, like when we order from Take-A-Lot or Amazon or whatever, we have to pay upfront normally. And then they would need their sales orders to reserve those items. So if it says that they are in stock, again, if you do 60 minutes, same thing, it immediately reserves that stock. And then they go and put it together and eventually send you the actual invoice. So you want those sales orders to reserve that stock because you don't want to oversell the stock. As well, if you do tell clients, look, it takes 7 days, you want to know what you need to purchase, and then you want to make sure that that specific customer is getting their stock in that time so that you keep a good business relationship with them. Then again, display an active item bundle. So we can create item bundles from the item list. So this, like your movies where they do the popcorn and the soda and maybe a bag of sweets, and they have different, medium, large, whatever, that would be considered item bundles. So each one of those items costs something, and then you put them together as a combo. So again, if it's inactive, it's up to you whether you want to see that. But again, if you have a lot of items, you probably don't, because then it means a lot of scrolling. Then here is also where you can set or create your price list. So for example, you can change the name here and you can say retail. Here you can say wholesale, etc. So you can create your different price lists to use. Then if we look at our outstanding balances, this is how the outstanding balances are going to be captured. And this is called your aging, and it refers to the number of days that a customer or a supplier balance is outstanding. And this is where you can select whether you want it to be day-based or month-based. So if you tick monthly, the system will be monthly. However, if you deselect this is where it would be daily, and you will have to set up your terms. So this is where, if you want it to be both, some people do come from pasta accounting and you have the option of both there. You don't have the option of both per se in Sage accounting. Monthly is monthly. If you want monthly and day-based, deselect monthly. And then when you are creating your customers, your suppliers, you would then set up 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, your 7 days, your whatever terms you want. But it would then be based on the days, and you'd have to know how many days are monthly. If you do select monthly, the system will then be set up monthly accordingly. Then run aging based on, and you can either run it on the invoice date, so the date that you invoiced, or the due date when you say the payment is due. So if you give your customer, for example, 30 days to pay, the aging, if it's on the due date, will only start counting once they've reached the payment date, which is 30 days after they've received the invoice. That's when it will start aging. If you want it on the invoice date, that is from the date that you send them the invoice. Then our personal information, this is again where you can change and you can go, look, this is what we're doing. The retention period is 5 years. It's required, for example, by SARS. And consent to VAT 201 cross-border data transfer. That is if you agree to that. And if you click on that, it will then advise you easily and secure manage your VAT 201 submissions through Sage regulatory reporting. And it will give you the information. This is where you can tick it and say, yes, for the business that I represent, I accept or I decline. And then it will either run it or not run it through those regulatory boundaries. Then our VAT settings, this is where, again, guys, you can come and change this, invoice-based, payment-based, or no VAT. So if you don't need to charge VAT and it's no VAT, you would select your no VAT. It would then change it accordingly, and there will be no VAT charged on any of your documents. Payment-based would mean that when you are that the VAT only applies when you are receiving payments, and then invoice-based is normal, so the VAT is immediately calculated when you are processing those documents accordingly. This is also where you can set up your last VAT period end date, your last submission due, and you can set up your reporting frequency. So how often do you need to report? Every 1 month, every 2 months, every 3 months, etc. And then offset credits on sales and purchases. So what this means is that if you purchase goods from your supplier and you return them, instead of that going to output VAT, because the VAT is then seen as credit VAT, it puts it on the input VAT for your suppliers as a negative value. So they literally offset each other instead of moving to output and input and it being confusing because you now have credit notes in input and return and debit notes in output. You actually offset them and then you can actually see the positives and the negatives. Then guys, on our documents and our statements, this is where you can write your statement messages. So for example, please make payment to account. In 30 days, please note payment is due within the next 7 days. In 60 days, please note that your account is past due. Please make urgent payments, and so on and so forth until possibly you get to please note we're taking legal action. So that's where you can write those messages if you wish for them to be there. If not, you can leave them blank. Document numbers, especially if you are moving accounting programs, this is important because it allows you to come in, look at your old system and actually capture those exact numbers in the new document. So you can sit here and you can change those accordingly. And once you have changed them, you will save them. It should allow me to change them. I haven't done this in a while, but that is where you should be able to change your document numbers. So you would change them here accordingly. I'm not sure why mine doesn't want me to do that currently, but this is where you should be able to change your document numbers in the new documents, and then you should be able to change them accordingly and save them. Document descriptions, again, this is where you can come and you can in fact change those document names. So here we can see that I've clicked on them. I just want to go back. Did I not click on that properly? I think I did. Anyway, this is where you can come and change the document name. So for example, although sales order will always be sales order on the system, when you print the document, it will then say performer invoice, for example. And then you can also change the copy name to the same. And so this is where you can change your documents. Then customer document messages, this is where you can see that it says Standard Bank and it would have had the banking details. And then for credit notes, you can add the different things, receipts, write-offs. Same for your supplier document messages. And then invoice and statement layouts. Again, this is where if you want to change those layouts, you can do so. And this is also where you can use the custom layout designer. We do have videos on how to use the custom layout designer. So you're welcome to go look at our YouTube channel if you would like to know how to do that. Once you've saved them, you will come here and you will give that document a name, and then it will show in the list of names and you will be able to select that layout that you've created. Then if we look at our branding, again, here we can look at the branding. We can see what the logo looks like. We can see what we wanted on invoices and statements emails, as well as our printed documents. Is this logo correct? Do we want it on the top left or the top right? And this is where you can change it accordingly. So if you get a new logo, you can come in and you can change it. You can also then preview and see what that will look like. So if it's too small, maybe you need to change that and make it look a little bit different. Our user defined fields. So this is if, for example, you go into your customers or you go into your suppliers or your items, your assets, your documents and transactions, and there are fields that you require that do not appear by default. You can then set those up as either text fields, numeric fields, yes, no values, or date values. So for example, if you have a customer and you are in the medical field and you need, for example, to know their medical aid name and the medical aid number, text field, you can have medical aid and then number, medical aid number. And that will then appear accordingly for you to fill out in those numeric fields. And when you then go to your list, you can then select that you want to see those fields accordingly. So for example, for supplier, you may want to have, for example, the supplier code, because maybe they use different codes to your item codes, and you want to know what the supplier code is, or maybe you want to have a, for example, default supplier, and you can say default supplier, and then that you can type in the supplier that you would normally use. Oh, sorry, this is on suppliers, not items. On suppliers, I have no idea what you would use. Sorry, guys, I don't have an example, but again, text fields, number fields, there might be something extra that you want to add. On items. Sorry, I jumped ahead. On items, this is where you might want to do preferred supplier, for example, so that when you look at that item, you know, actually the person that I normally use is X, or maybe they have a different code to the code that you've put into your system. So instead of you having to go look through their manual or whatever when you are ordering, you can then see, okay, this is what I need to send through. This is their code, that's my code, that's how they work. And again, you would just type that in, for example, preferred supplier. And then that would come in for you to fill in. Please ignore my bad spelling. I'm sure that that's right. Oh well. Preferred supplier, and then for example, you can have supplier code if you want to know what the code is for the specific item. Then assets, again guys, if you look at your asset register and there are things that you require that are not there by default, check, is it a text field, a numeric field, a yes, no field, or a date field? And then you can enter that accordingly, as well as on your documents and transactions. So what do you need on the customer quote, the customer sales order, and you will see it goes all the way down. And it gives you text and date fields accordingly. So these are things that you would like to add as user-defined fields so that when processing, that information is entered, or you can enter that information onto the invoice itself. Then our email signatures, this is where you can upload your email signature. So you can add a signature, you can give it a name, you can select which document you want the signature on. This is where you can give it a subject and you can add your body. And then once you press save, basically if you need to ever manage that, you would come to manage. It does tell you before leaving, please save any changes. Would you like to save any changes? We can say yes. And then you will see that it'll take you to your email signatures, for example, and then you can preview them. At this point, it's all set to default, but this is specifically if you want to send specific messages based on the various options. Then if you have add-on modules, this is where you'll see your add-on modules, for example, multi-currency. Guys, please be very careful when using multi-currency, because we do have people who set up the multi-currency, and once you've set up the multi-currency on this item, a lot of people go enable multi-currency, but then they select the wrong option here. Please make sure when you are selecting your home currency that you please select the right currency, because although development at times is able to change this, it makes it very difficult because a lot of people there, for example, select the USD, not realizing that the initial one is your home currency. Once the home currency is set, you then need to come in and add the currency accordingly for your multi-currency. If you have accidentally added US dollars or pounds or whatever as your home currency, Please add the South African rands if your home currency should be rands, because we cannot change the system unless all the currencies are here. Mostly your home currency, because it'll only show us the currencies that appear in this list. So that's just a tip and trick to make it easier. If you make that mistake, please add all the currencies you need and then tell us what the home currency should be so that we can alter it based on the list that is provided here. Otherwise, we're going to have to ask you to do that, and that delays us assisting you. And guys, that is basically your company settings. From here, this is where you will then come and add your customers and start adding them accordingly. Here you can see your user-defined fields, which will show up. If you did in fact change those values, instead of saying text field 1, it should then come up, for example, and say medical aid and medical aid number, so you can enter those details accordingly. And you will fill in all of the details. You can also choose to import your data. And these will need to be as CSV files. This is why I said it's very, very important that you please make sure your control panel region is correct. And this is where you would then select customers, customer categories, supplier categories, etc. And you import them accordingly. If you are not sure what the layout should look like, this is where you can click on the import and export data. This will then take you hopefully to the correct link. If it redirects us, because it should redirect you to our help file or to our online help. Otherwise, you can go to your data guide, and here you'll see that it gives you a guide. This is if you are converting, because you can do that. We can help you convert your data. But otherwise, what the system should do is it should take you to sagekb.com. I do know that it was meant to redirect. It's just taking a while, but I'm not sure if that's my internet. And if you do ever come to the Sage knowledge base, please make sure that you choose Business Cloud Accounting. This is Sage Accounting. It's just the fancy name for it. And then, for example, you can go import. And then it will give you all of the options when importing. So how do I import master files? This master file is your customers, suppliers, and items. And instead of you having to enter them one by one, you can import them. The limit is 500 records. So if you have more than that, you are going to have to do it in batches of 500, but then it will show you the different layouts, as well as if you do go converting to accounting, you can click the different templates. So for example, customer import template. This will provide you with the templates, and guys, you are welcome to download this file and then delete column A accordingly once you have entered all of the options. So you can do that as well, and you can do that for your imports and then import them accordingly. I'm not going to go through the whole importing. This was more just how to start a company and how to go through that company list. So I am going to ask, does anyone have any questions with regards to how you add a company and then how you go through your company settings? If you do have any questions, please use the question icon, which is the little question mark in the speech bubble. It should be on the right-hand side of your screen. You need to click on it and type your questions through to me because you cannot speak directly to me. I'm going to give us a few moments to see if there are any questions with regards to this topic. If after, let's say at 20 to 3, I have received no questions, you can then ask me any other question with regards to Sage Accounting, any question that you may have, and I will help you if I can, or I will advise where you can or who you can reach out to for assistance. Okay, so guys, I see that we do hopefully have a question. Just wanted to find out, how do I add a text field on the invoice, or would that fall under custom invoice? So it depends on the field. If it is a field that you need to add to every invoice, that's where I would advise that you go to company, change company settings, and then on the company settings, on the user defined field, that's where you can go to documents and transactions, and then you'll see the different documents, and then you can choose to add a text field. But this is if it's a standard field and you need to enter that. So it's not a static field. It is a field that will change depending on which customer or supplier you're processing to, and you need to enter that text field or the date field, for example. So for example, valid till. And you might want to select that. I do think that is a generic field, but I honestly, sorry guys, not working with this on a day-to-day, I actually can't think of any field you'd want, but it's a dynamic field. So it's a field that every invoice, you need that text field on there, but the actual information that you enter will change per invoice. Does that make sense? Please let me know, because that I would change here if it's a static field. For example, something that appears on every single invoice that you have, and you want that to appear there, that is where I would probably use the custom layout then, because then you can just choose a text field and enter the text that you need, which will then display on every single invoice, irrespective of the item, the customer, the supplier, etc. So I hope that helps. Okay, static field then, I would download the custom. Sorry, I just want to actually give you some on that. So let me go back here, because the knowledge base, our videos are linked to this as well. So I just want to do that custom designer. I'm going to send this link through to you, and you can then, this is the getting started, and this should help you with that if you do need it. So I hope that helps. Guys, does anyone have any other questions? So here you can see Sage Accounting, Pastel. So I know the 50 Cloud is also confusing, don't worry. Level up your software game, free webinar. So here you can also see, guys, we have put here, there's a free webinar on choosing between desktop and cloud software. And here you can then click on the provided link. So these links are also available via the community hub. Should you lose them, feel free to log into the Sage community and then just select the product that you need to go to. So Sage Accounting for the online version. Their free webinar, learn how to create a company from scratch. And you can just click on that, and then it will give you those links to sign up, and that should come up hopefully a few days, a week to a few days before we actually launch the topic as well, in case you lose them. Okay, guys, does anyone have any further questions? Anything else that anyone needs help with? Otherwise, guys, again, I hope that you have the most wonderful day, wonderful week, and hopefully I'll see you at one of our next webinars. Thank you so much. Ciao, ciao.